The automatic doors of First Trust Bank's Maplewood branch slid open at 9:05 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday in October. Sunlight poured across the polished tile floor, catching specks of dust in the air. At 62, Walter Hayes rolled through the entrance in his wheelchair, his hands steady on the rims. He wore a faded navy jacket, a knit cap pulled low over his graying temples, and an expression so calm it could have been mistaken for indifference. To the casual observer, he was just another customer, maybe there to deposit a Social Security check or dispute a fee. But Walter wasn't here for that. He was here to watch. Maplewood, a quiet suburb of Cincinnati, wasn't known for drama. The bank sat between a diner and a hardware store, its brick facade blending into the strip mall's unremarkable sprawl. Inside, the lobby smelled of coffee and faint traces of carpet cleaner. A handful of customers sat in the waiting area, a retiree flipping through a magazine, a young mother scrolling her phone, her toddler fidgeting beside her. The tellers were still settling in, their name tags gleaming under fluorescent lights. Walter made a slow loop around the lobby, his eyes scanning the room without lingering too long on any one thing. He noted the security cameras, 4, maybe 5, their red lights blinking discreetly. He saw the employees, a young man at the teller counter, a woman adjusting her headset at the loan desk, and behind the reception counter, a woman in her late 30s with auburn hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read Sarah Mitchell, Client Services. Walter approached the counter, his wheelchair gliding silently. "Good morning," he said, his voice low but clear. "I'd like to speak with the branch manager, please." Sarah barely looked up from her computer. Her fingers paused mid-type, and she tilted her head just enough to acknowledge him. "Do you have an appointment?" Her tone was clipped, like she'd already decided this was a waste of her time. "No, I don't," Walter replied. "But I'd appreciate a moment of their time." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, and without lowering her voice, muttered to a coworker nearby, "Here we go. Another one who thinks they can just walk in and demand the manager." The coworker, a middle-aged woman named Linda, gave an awkward chuckle but didn't respond. The words weren't loud, but they carried. The young mother in the waiting area glanced up, her brow furrowing. Her toddler, oblivious, tugged at her sleeve. The retiree with the magazine lowered it slightly, his eyes flicking toward Walter. The air in the room shifted, like a held breath. Walter didn't flinch. He tilted his head, not in anger but in calculation. He'd seen this before too many times to be surprised. But this was bolder than usual, more blatant. "I can wait," he said evenly. "But I'd still like to see the manager." Sarah sighed, loud enough to make it clear she was annoyed. "Sir, unless you're a client here, the manager doesn't have time for walk-ins." She tapped her pen on the desk, her nails clicking against the wood. "What's this about, anyway? A complaint? Because we have an online form for that." "I'm not here to complain," Walter said. "I'm here to discuss something with the manager." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then what are you here for?" Her voice rose, sharp enough to draw more attention. "Because I don't have time for." "Is there a problem?" A man's voice cut through the tension. It came from Javier Torres, a client services representative in his early 40s, who'd just stepped out from a side hallway. His name tag gleamed, and his dark eyes moved from Sarah to Walter, assessing the situation. Sarah didn't turn. "I've got it, Javier," she said, her tone dismissive. Javier didn't budge. "Sarah," he said, lowering his voice, "you might want to ease up." "I said I've got it," she snapped, her cheeks flushing. Walter watched the exchange, his expression unchanged. Then, with the patience of someone who'd spent decades navigating rooms like this, he spoke again. "Please, just the manager." Sarah rolled her eyes, grabbed a clipboard, and slapped it on the counter. "Fine. Write your name down. Someone might get to you in an hour." Her words dripped with condescension, like she was scolding a child. Walter didn't touch the clipboard. Instead, he opened a slim leather folder on his lap and pulled out a single sheet of paper, tri-folded and crisp. The room seemed to pause, as if sensing something was about to shift. Sarah leaned against the counter, pretending not to notice, but her coworker Linda whispered, "What's he doing?" Walter slid the paper across the counter and tapped it once. "I'd appreciate it if you could hand this to your manager," he said. Sarah scoffed. "Sir, we don't accept random paperwork. If this is a complaint, like I said." "It's not a complaint," Walter interrupted, his voice still calm. It's documentation. Sarah's smirk faltered, but she recovered quickly. Look, you're not on the schedule. Unless you're depositing something or seeing a banker, you can wait like everyone else. She shoved the paper aside with a flick of her wrist. The young mother in the waiting area whispered to her toddler, "Stay here, sweetie." She stood, her face tight with discomfort, and approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said to Sarah. "That's no way to talk to a customer." Sarah's head whipped around. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you." "It does when I'm sitting right here listening to it," the mother shot back. The retiree with the magazine nodded in agreement, his expression grim. Walter raised a hand, gentle but firm. "I appreciate that," he said to the mother, "but I've got this." He turned to Javier. "Would you mind taking a look at this paper?" Javier stepped forward without hesitation. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but Javier silenced her with a raised hand. He picked up the document, scanned it, and his eyes widened. This is from corporate," he said, his voice low. Sarah frowned. "What?" Javier didn't answer. He read the bottom of the page again, then looked at Walter. "I think we need to get Tom out here. Now." Sarah hesitated, her confidence cracking. "He's in a meeting." "Sarah," Javier said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Get him." With a huff, Sarah grabbed the phone and dialed an extension. She turned her back to the lobby, muttering into the receiver. Walter didn't watch her. He scanned the room, noting the customers now openly staring, the tellers pausing mid-transaction. The toddler, sensing the tension, clung to his mother's leg. Sarah hung up. "He'll be out when he can," she said, stepping away from the counter like she wanted to distance herself from the whole thing. Walter glanced at Javier. "Thank you." Javier nodded. "We don't get many visits from corporate. I didn't recognize you, sir." "That's the point," Walter said quietly. Sarah froze. "Corporate?" she repeated, her voice flatter now, cautious. "You work for First Trust?" Walter didn't answer. He turned to face the lobby, his hands resting lightly on his wheelchair's rims. His posture was calm, but there was a weight to it, like a man waiting for a storm to break. Sarah paced behind the counter, her earlier smugness replaced by unease. She tapped her nails against her arm, her silence louder than her words had been. Across the lobby, a young teller named Marcus paused mid-transaction, his eyes on Walter. He'd seen the whole thing: Sarah's tone, Javier's intervention, the shift in the room. He reached into his pocket, hesitated, then pulled out his phone and started recording, his thumb hovering over the stop button. The toddler's mother leaned toward her son. "Is he, like, some kind of secret boss?" she whispered. Her son, wide-eyed, shook his head. "He doesn't need to be secret. Look at her, she's scared now." Sarah wasn't scared, not yet, but she was starting to realize she'd miscalculated. She shot Javier a glare, but he was busy typing at his desk, ignoring her. The front doors opened, and a woman in a sharp blazer stepped in. She paused, sensing the tension, and her eyes landed on Walter. She approached the counter, her heels clicking on the tile. "Hi," Sarah said, perking up. "Welcome to First Trust. I can help you in just." "I'm not here for a transaction," the woman said. Her name was Evelyn Carter, a longtime client who'd worked with the bank for 15 years. She stepped toward Walter and lowered her voice. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't know you'd be here today." Walter gave a small smile. Neither did she. Evelyn glanced at Sarah, her expression unreadable. "Is that so?" Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stared at Evelyn, then at Walter, her mind racing to catch up. "I'll be over there," Evelyn said, nodding toward a chair by the window. "I was told you'd be visiting this month. Glad I caught you." She walked away, pulling out a notebook and pen. Marcus, still recording, lowered his phone slightly. This wasn't a fight, it was a reckoning. The air had shifted, and even the customers who didn't know what was happening could feel it. Sarah returned to the counter, her movement slow. "I didn't know," she said, staring at the desk. "I didn't know who you were." Walter looked at her, his gaze steady. "That's the point." He paused, then added, "Would you have spoken to me differently if I wasn't someone important?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The lobby fell silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Marcus glanced at Javier, who was watching from across the room. Sarah said nothing, her face pale. The hallway door clicked open. Tom Reynolds, the branch manager, stepped out, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a tie slightly askew. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Sarah first. She straightened, but her hands trembled. Then he saw Walter, and his expression changed recognition, then something close to dread. "Mr. Hayes?" Tom asked, stepping forward. Walter nodded. "Tom." That single word made the room feel colder. Tom extended a hand, and Walter shook it, firm and steady. "I wasn't told you'd be visiting," Tom said carefully. "I like to keep things simple," Walter replied. "Surprise visits show me what's really going on." Tom nodded, his jaw tight. "Understood." He turned to Sarah. "We'll talk later." Sarah swallowed hard. "I just didn't." Tom cut her off with a look not harsh, but final. "Mr. Hayes, would you like to come to my office?" Walter motioned to the counter. "I submitted a document. It explains why I'm here." Tom took the paper from Javier, who'd quietly brought it over, and scanned it. His face hardened. "Follow me, please." Walter nodded and began wheeling toward the hallway. He paused, turning back to Sarah. "I assume you have cameras here?" "Yes, sir," Tom said. 6-point coverage, synced to our server." "Good," Walter said. "I'd like to review this morning's footage." Sarah's voice cracked. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't mean." Walter looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. "You meant exactly what you said. That's the problem." He wheeled down the hallway, leaving Sarah standing there, her confidence crumbling. Evelyn, seated by the window, closed her notebook and gave Sarah a look of quiet disappointment. Marcus stopped recording. The truth was louder than any video. Walter Hayes wheeled into Tom Reynolds' office, the door clicking shut behind them. The room was modest but functional. A wooden desk cluttered with papers, a laptop humming softly, and a window overlooking the parking lot where Maplewood's morning traffic crawled by. A framed photo of Tom's family sat next to a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Boss." The air smelled faintly of aftershave and printer ink. Tom gestured to a cleared space near the desk, but Walter positioned his wheelchair where he could see both the laptop and the door. He wasn't here to get comfortable. "Coffee? Water?" Tom asked, settling into his chair. His voice was polite, but his fingers drummed nervously on the desk. "No, thank you," Walter said. His tone was calm, almost gentle, but there was a weight to it that made Tom sit up straighter. Tom opened his laptop and tapped a few keys. "I'll pull up the footage now." He glanced at Walter, as if gauging how much trouble this visit would bring. "I'm sorry about what happened out there." She's sharp, but sometimes her tone gets away from her. Walter didn't respond. He leaned back slightly, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. The silence wasn't hostile, but it was deliberate, forcing Tom to fill it. "I mean," Tom continued, "we've had complaints about her before, nothing major, just clients saying she can be abrupt. I've talked to her about it. She's good with numbers, though. Moves accounts like nobody's business." Walter tilted his head. "Numbers don't talk back. People do." Tom's fingers froze on the keyboard. He nodded, chastened, and focused on the screen. The security footage loaded, time-stamped 9:05 a.m. The video played in grainy clarity. Walter's entrance, Sarah's dismissive words, Javier's intervention, the customer's reactions. Walter watched without expression, but his eyes narrowed when Sarah muttered, "Another one who thinks they can just walk in and demand the manager." The audio was faint but unmistakable. "I need a copy of this sent to legal," Walter said when the clip ended. "Already done," Tom replied, his voice tight. "The moment Javier showed me your document, I knew." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking older than his 50 years. "I'm not trying to defend her, Walter, but I don't want this to blow up bigger than it needs to." Walter's gaze was steady. "I didn't come here to fire anyone, Tom. I came to see how this branch runs. But I also didn't come to be treated like I don't belong." Tom winced. "I understand. There are things we've overlooked." She slipped through the cracks. Sharp tongue, like I said, but her metrics kept her in good standing. Today, but that was something else. Walter didn't reply. The footage looped silently on the screen, Sarah's smirk frozen in time. Outside the office, the lobby was stirring. Customers whispered, their voices muffled through the closed door. The toddler's mother was explaining something to her son, her tone low but firm. Javier stood near the reception desk, his arms crossed, watching the hallway like a sentinel. Marcus, the young teller, had returned to his station but kept glancing at his phone, the video he'd recorded still fresh in his mind. Back in the lobby, Sarah stood behind the counter, her arms locked tight across her chest. Her auburn hair, usually impeccable, had a strand out of place, and her jaw moved slightly, like she was chewing on words she couldn't spit out. She kept looking toward the hallway, waiting for Tom to emerge and fix this. But the confidence she'd worn like armor was gone, replaced by a brittleness that made her look smaller. Marcus hesitated, then approached Javier. "Is this really happening?" he whispered. Javier nodded. "Every bit of it." Across the room, Evelyn Carter stood and addressed the waiting area, her voice calm but commanding. "For those wondering, that man isn't just from corporate. He's a major shareholder in this bank." Heads turned. The retiree with the magazine let out a low whistle. The toddler's mother nodded, as if she'd suspected as much. "So he let her talk to him like that?" the retiree asked, his voice gruff but curious. Evelyn gave a small shrug. "That's how he works. He watches before he acts." Sarah's head whipped around. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice half laughing, half desperate. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was following protocol." No one responded. Marcus looked away, focusing on a stack of deposit slips. Javier didn't flinch. "We both heard what you said, Sarah," he said calmly. "You know what you meant." "I didn't mean it like that," she insisted, her voice rising. "It was a joke." "Were you laughing?" Javier asked. Sarah's mouth opened, but no words came out. The hallway door opened, and Tom stepped out, a folder tucked under his arm. Walter followed, his wheelchair moving with quiet precision. Tom's face was unreadable, but his shoulders were tense. He walked straight to Sarah. "Come with me," he said. "Why? What's going on?" Sarah's voice cracked, but she stopped herself. Something in Tom's tone told her this wasn't negotiable. They disappeared into the back, the door closing with a soft thud. The lobby fell silent again. Walter scanned the room, his eyes moving from face to face. Some customers looked embarrassed, others curious. The retiree gave him a small nod, like a silent acknowledgement. Walter wheeled over to Marcus, who was still fidgeting with his phone. "You were recording earlier," Walter said, not as an accusation but a statement. Marcus cleared his throat. "Yeah, I thought it might help. In case she denied it." "You can delete it," Walter said. Marcus blinked. "Sir." "There's no need," Walter said. "The lesson's already here." Marcus nodded, his thumb hovering over the delete button. "I wasn't sure what to do. She outranks me. I didn't want to get involved." "You did fine," Walter said. "The hard part isn't speaking up. It's staying calm while the truth shows itself." The toddler's mother, standing nearby, smiled softly. "He's not what I expected," she whispered to her son. "That's the point, Mom," the boy replied. "People never are." Walter heard them but didn't turn. His shoulders relaxed slightly, as if their words had settled something in him. In the back office, though, a very different conversation was unfolding. Tom shut the door behind Sarah, who stood in the center of the room, her arms still crossed. The folder in Tom's hand felt heavier than it should have. He opened it, revealing printouts of the surveillance stills Sarah's face in every frame, her smirk, her dismissive gesture. "I want to be clear," Tom said, his voice low but firm. "This isn't just a review. This is documentation." Sarah's voice trembled. "You're not serious." "I'm not playing," Tom replied. "Do you know how many people saw what happened out there?" "I didn't know who he was," Sarah said, desperation creeping in. "If I had—" "Stop," Tom said flatly. "You think the problem was not knowing he was a shareholder? You think it's okay to talk to anyone like that?" "I didn't mean it," she muttered, her eyes darting to the floor. Tom leaned back in his chair. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect to get caught." Sarah looked smaller now, her polished exterior cracking. "You're really letting me go?" Tom leaned forward, his voice softer but no less resolute. "Not because he told me to. Because I should have done this sooner. I've had complaints about you before clients, staff. I let it slide because you hit your targets. That ends now." Sarah's throat tightened. "I can apologize. Publicly. To him, to everyone." "An apology doesn't rewrite how you treated someone you thought had no power," Tom said. "I need your badge and login credentials." Sarah hesitated, her hands shaking as she unclipped her name tag and set it on the desk. She typed her deactivation code into the system, her fingers fumbling. When she was done, she looked up. "He humiliated me." "No," Tom said. "You did that to yourself." Sarah took a slow breath, grabbed her coat, and walked out. She didn't look at anyone as she crossed the lobby, her heels clicking on the tile. The door slid shut behind her, and the room exhaled. Walter sat near the front desk, Evelyn nearby, her notebook open again. The customers had resumed their business, but the air was different now, charged, like the moment after a storm. Tom returned, his face weary but resolute. "All done?" Walter asked. Tom nodded. "I'd like you to speak to the team, if you're willing." Walter considered it, then nodded. "Bring them in." Tom disappeared into the staff lounge and returned with 6 employees: Javier, Marcus, the loan officer, 2 tellers, and the janitor, a quiet man named Clarence. They formed a loose semicircle near the waiting area, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Walter didn't move from his chair, but when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that silenced the room. "I didn't come here to trap anyone," he began. "I didn't come to catch someone slipping or to fire a person. That's not my role." No one moved. The toddler's mother leaned forward slightly, her son now asleep in her lap. "I visit branches every few months," Walter continued. "I don't announce it. I don't wear a suit. I show up, sit, watch, ask simple questions. Not to test your banking skills, but to see how people are treated when they look like they have nothing to offer." Marcus lowered his eyes. The loan officer shifted uncomfortably. Javier stood still, his face unreadable. "Today," Walter said, "I wasn't treated as a client. I wasn't treated as a man. I wasn't even treated as a human being. I was spoken to like a problem. The only reason that changed was when Sarah realized I had power." The silence was heavy, not awkward but profound. Evelyn wiped a tear from her eye, her pen still in her hand. "I've spent my life being underestimated," Walter said. "Dismissed. Looked past. That's fine. I don't need attention. I've built my life quietly, without needing validation." He turned to Marcus. "You saw something wrong and recorded it. You didn't say a word, but you knew it mattered. That takes something." Marcus looked stunned. "I didn't know what else to do." "That's okay," Walter said. "You didn't need to fix it. You just needed to acknowledge it." He looked at Javier. "You spoke up, not to protect me, but because it was right. That means more than you know." Javier nodded, his throat tight. "I thought I'd get written up." Walter smiled faintly. "Not in this bank." He turned to the group. "Some of you said nothing. I understand. It's hard when someone above you is doing wrong. Most people freeze. But remember this. The way you treat a person when you think they can't help you, that's the version of yourself the world remembers." The loan officer bit her lip. Clarence, the janitor, stood at the back, his eyes fixed on Walter. "You don't have to be perfect," Walter said. "You don't have to save the day. But you do have to try. Every time someone walks through that door, they're trusting you with more than money. They're trusting you not to humiliate them." Evelyn closed her notebook, her expression soft but resolute. Walter took a breath. "Sarah lost her job today, not because of me, but because she exposed something that shouldn't exist in a place built on trust. This branch can be better. You can set the tone. That choice is yours." Tom cleared his throat. "I think we all needed to hear that, sir." Walter nodded. "Let's hope you take it with you." He began wheeling toward the doors, the lobby quiet save for the soft hum of the air conditioner. But before he reached the exit, Clarence stepped forward, his work boots scuffing the tile. "Sir," he said, his voice rough but steady, "I just want to say thank you." Walter turned. "And you are?" "Clarence Johnson," the janitor said. "Been here 25 years. Seen a lot of people come and go. Some don't know how to look you in the eye. What you did today, it means something." Walter smiled. "Pleasure to meet you, Clarence. Respect doesn't come from a title." "No, sir," Clarence said. "It sure doesn't." The lobby of First Trust Bank's Maplewood branch remained hushed as Walter Hayes wheeled toward the exit, Clarence Johnson's words still lingering in the air. The automatic doors loomed ahead, sunlight glinting off the glass, but the weight of what had just happened held everyone in place. Customers and staff alike seemed caught in a moment too big to move past quickly. Walter's speech hadn't been loud or theatrical, but it had landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the room. Marcus, the young teller, stood near his station, his hands still fidgeting with a paperclip. He glanced at Javier Torres, who was watching Walter with a mix of respect and something deeper, maybe relief. The loan officer, a woman named Rachel Bennett, stepped forward hesitantly, her voice soft. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't say anything earlier. I saw what happened, and I should have spoken up." Walter paused, his hands resting on the rims of his wheelchair. He looked at her, not with judgment, but with a quiet understanding. "And now you have," he said. "That's enough." Rachel blinked, surprised by the gentleness of his response. She'd braced for a lecture, but Walter's words felt like permission to try again. She nodded, stepping back, her face a mix of gratitude and resolve. Evelyn Carter, the long-time client, caught up to Walter near the doors. Her blazer was crisp, her notebook tucked under her arm, but her smile was warm. "If you ever decide to take a public role, Mr. Hayes, I'd be first in line to support you." Walter chuckled, the sound low and genuine. "No spotlight for me, Evelyn. I'm better in the shadows." She leaned in slightly. "That speech will stick with people. Let's hope their actions match it." "Let's hope," Walter said, his eyes scanning the lobby one last time. Tom Reynolds joined them, holding a sealed envelope. "I drafted an apology letter from the branch," he said, handing it to Walter. "It's addressed to you personally, though I know it doesn't cover everything that happened today." Walter accepted the envelope but didn't open it. "I'm not here for apologies, Tom. I'm here to see who this branch really is. And I saw it today." Tom glanced over his shoulder at the staff, who were beginning to disperse. "We'll be better. I promise." "Don't tell me," Walter said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Show them." He nodded toward the customers still watching from the waiting area. Tom extended a hand, and Walter shook it, their grip steady. The exchange was brief but heavy, a silent agreement that things would change or else. As Walter approached the doors, Marcus caught up to him, his steps quick and nervous. "Mr. Hayes," he said, rubbing his palms together. "I was wondering, would you consider coming back? Not to check on us, but to talk to the new hires, maybe the interns. I think people would really benefit from hearing you again." Walter paused, considering the young man's earnestness. "That's not my job, son." "I know," Marcus said quickly, "but I think it matters." There was something in Marcus's voice, not flattery, but belief. Walter studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll think about it." Marcus smiled, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Thank you. For today, I mean." Walter didn't respond, but his expression softened. A customer, the young mother from earlier, stepped forward to hold the door open. She didn't do it because Walter needed help. His wheelchair navigated the threshold with ease, but because it felt right. "Have a good day, sir," she said, her smile genuine. "You too," Walter replied, his voice quiet as he passed through. He rolled down the ramp into the parking lot, the October air cool against his face. Behind him, the doors slid shut, but the impact of his visit lingered like a pulse. The branch felt different now, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the lesson. Inside, Tom stood in the lobby, arms crossed, watching his staff return to their duties. There was no chatter, no casual banter, just the soft clack of keyboards and the rustle of papers. Rachel, the loan officer, approached a customer with a warmth she hadn't shown earlier, asking twice if they needed anything else. Javier stayed near the front desk, his presence steady, like he was guarding the space Sarah had left behind. Marcus greeted each person at his counter with direct eye contact, his usual nervous energy replaced by purpose. Sarah's absence was palpable. Her empty chair at the reception desk, the untouched clipboard, the silence where her sharp voice had been, it all served as a reminder of what had unfolded. Customers came and went, but they moved slower, as if reluctant to break the spell of the morning. The retiree with the magazine lingered longer than necessary, his eyes on the staff, like he was waiting for another shoe to drop. In the break room, Marcus and Javier sat across from each other, paper coffee cups in hand. The room was small, with a microwave humming in the corner and a bulletin board pinned with shift schedules. Javier took a sip, then looked at Marcus. "You ever seen anything like that?" Marcus shook his head. "Not in real life. Movies, maybe. But this had felt more real." Javier nodded. "Because it was." Down the hall, Clarence Johnson pushed his mop across the tile, his movements slower than usual. He stopped near the front window and looked out at the parking lot where Walter had disappeared. His face held a quiet satisfaction, like a man who'd seen something he'd waited years to witness. Clarence had cleaned this branch for 25 years, emptying trash cans and scrubbing floors while people barely noticed him. But Walter had seen him, had spoken his name. That meant something. Tom returned to his office, the envelope Walter hadn't opened still in his hand. He placed it in a locked drawer, not because it was secret, but because it felt like a marker of the die, a tangible piece of what had changed. He sat at his desk, staring at the laptop where the security footage was still paused. Sarah's face stared back, her smirk a ghost of the morning's mistakes. An hour passed, then two. The branch hummed with activity, but it wasn't the same. Customers noticed the shift, Rachel's extra courtesy, Marcus's newfound confidence, Javier's quiet vigilance. Even Clarence moved with a purpose that hadn't been there before. The toddler's mother returned later that afternoon, her son in tow, clutching a $5 bill. She approached Marcus's counter. "I just wanted to say," the boy said, his voice shy but clear, "that guy was cool. I liked how he didn't yell." Marcus smiled. "Me too. Want to open an account?" The boy nodded, sliding the bill across the counter. "Yeah." Marcus handed him a deposit slip. "Best decision you'll make today." The simple exchange felt like a capstone to the day, a small but meaningful shift in the branch's rhythm. It wasn't about firing Sarah or Walter's speech, it was about dignity, about the way people treated each other when the cameras weren't rolling. Evelyn Carter, meanwhile, had made a call to First Trust's corporate office from her car in the parking lot. Her voice was steady as she recounted the morning's events, her words precise but unflinching. "I've been with this bank for 15 years, she said. "Today, I saw something I hope you never forget. Your people don't need more training, they need to listen." Her words would later circulate through corporate, quoted in memos and discussed in boardrooms. But in Maplewood, the impact was already felt. The branch was quieter, not out of fear, but out of reflection. Staff reevaluated their habits, their assumptions, the way they greeted strangers. Customers, too, seemed to carry themselves differently, as if Walter's presence had reminded them of something fundamental. By late afternoon, the sun cast long shadows across the lobby, the glass walls glowing gold. Clarence turned off the floor buffer, his work done for the day. Javier locked his drawer, his movements deliberate. Marcus double-checked his counter, then paused to help a customer who dropped her pen. Tom stepped into the center of the lobby, his voice soft but clear. "Let's make sure we never need a reminder like that again," he said. No one replied, but they heard him. The silence felt earned, a testament to the day's lessons. Walter was gone, but his influence remained, woven into the fabric of the branch. Back in the parking lot, Walter sat in his van, the ramp lowering with a soft whir. He checked his phone, where a text from Evelyn waited. "You made a difference today." "Thank you." He didn't reply, but a faint smile crossed his face as he drove away, the bank shrinking in his rearview mirror. The day wasn't over, though. In the hours that followed, whispers of the incident spread through Maplewood. Customers told friends at the diner, staff confided in spouses over dinner. By evening, a local news blog had picked up the story, though it got Walter's name wrong and exaggerated Sarah's outburst. The truth, as always, was quieter but more powerful. In the branch, the staff gathered briefly before closing, their faces tired but thoughtful. Rachel spoke first, her voice hesitant. "I keep thinking about what he said, about how we treat people when we think they can't help us." Javier nodded. "That's the part that sticks." Marcus, usually quiet, added, "I recorded it because I thought it'd be proof. But he didn't need it. He just let the truth do the work." Clarence, leaning against his mop, spoke last. "I've seen a lot in 25 years. People like him? They don't come around often. But when they do, you listen." Tom closed the meeting with a simple directive. "Tomorrow, we start fresh. But we don't forget today." As the staff left, the lobby empty and the lights dimmed, the branch felt like a place reborn, not perfect, but striving. Walter's visit had been a mirror, reflecting the flaws and the potential of everyone inside. And in Maplewood, a small town where change came slowly, that mirror would shine for a long time. The sun dipped low over Maplewood, casting a warm glow across the strip mall where First Trust Bank stood. Inside, the branch was winding down for the day, the lobby nearly empty save for a lone customer at the ATM and Clarence Johnson wiping down the front counter. The events of the morning, Walter Hayes' visit, Sarah Mitchell's dismissal, the quiet power of his words hung over the space like a lingering echo. The staff moved with purpose, but their usual end-of-day chatter was replaced by a reflective silence. What had happened wasn't just a workplace incident. It was a turning point, one that would ripple beyond the bank's glass walls. Tom Reynolds locked his office door, the sealed envelope from Walter still untouched in his drawer. He walked through the lobby, pausing to check the security system. The cameras, which had captured Sarah's misstep in stark clarity, blinked steadily above. Tom's face was etched with fatigue, but there was a resolve in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He'd managed this branch for a decade, steering it through audits and recessions, but today had tested him in a way no spreadsheet ever could. He'd let Sarah slide too long, and that failure weighed on him. Outside, Marcus stood by the employee entrance, his jacket slung over his shoulder. Javier joined him, loosening his tie. The parking lot was quiet, the diner across the street glowing with early dinner crowds. "You heading home?" Javier asked. Marcus nodded, but his gaze lingered on the bank. "Yeah, just thinking about today. Feels like we're part of something bigger now." Javier gave a small smile. "We are. That's what happens when someone like Hayes walks or rolls into your life." They parted ways, Javier's pickup truck rumbling out of the lot while Marcus walked toward the bus stop. As he waited, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, hesitating over his mother's number. She was 60, a retired nurse who'd spent her career dealing with people's worst days. He wanted to tell her about Walter, about how one man's calm had changed everything. But he pocketed the phone instead, deciding to save the story for Sunday dinner. Some things were better said in person. Inside the bank, Rachel Bennett lingered at her desk, reorganizing files she'd already sorted. She was 35, ambitious but cautious, and today had shaken her. She'd seen Sarah's behavior before, sharp comments, dismissive gestures, but had never called it out. It was easier to stay quiet, to focus on her own work. But Walter's words about treating people when they can't help you had lodged in her mind like a splinter. She glanced at a photo on her desk, her parents, both in their late 60s, smiling at a family reunion. They'd taught her better than to stay silent. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she'd be braver. Clarence, meanwhile, pushed his cleaning cart into the break room, humming a tune from his church choir. At 64, he'd seen enough of the world to know that moments like today were rare. He'd cleaned this branch since it opened, watching managers come and go, employees rise and fall. Most barely acknowledged him, but Walter had looked him in the eye, said his name. That small act carried weight, reminding Clarence of his father, a factory worker who'd taught him that dignity wasn't tied to a job title. As he emptied the trash, he felt a quiet pride not just in Walter, but in the branch's potential to be better. Across town, Evelyn Carter sat in her home office, her laptop open to an email draft. She'd already called corporate, but this message was personal, addressed to First Trust's regional director. "Walter Hayes didn't just expose a problem today," she wrote. "He showed us what leadership looks like. Your branches need more than policies, they need people who listen." She hit send, then leaned back, sipping tea from a mug her husband had bought her for their 40th anniversary. At 62, Evelyn had no patience for half measures. She'd banked with First Trust for 15 years, and today had solidified her loyalty not to the institution, but to people like Walter. Back at the branch, the young mother from earlier, Lisa Grayson, was tucking her son, Ethan, into bed. The $5 account he'd opened with Marcus was a small thing, but it felt monumental to the 7-year-old. "Mom," Ethan said, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. "That man in the wheelchair, was he a superhero?" Lisa smiled, brushing his hair back. "Not like in comics, sweetie. But he was strong in a different way. He stood up for what's right without yelling." Ethan nodded, his eyes heavy. "I want to be like him when I grow up." Lisa's heart swelled. At 58, she'd seen her share of injustice, from workplace slights to the casual racism her parents had endured in the 70s. Walter's calm had reminded her of her father, a bus driver who'd faced insults with the same quiet dignity. As she turned off Ethan's light, she made a mental note to write a letter to the bank, commending Walter and the staff who'd stepped up. By evening, whispers of the incident had spread through Maplewood. At the diner, a group of retirees debated the story over coffee, one insisting Sarah had been set up, while another argued she'd gotten what she deserved. At the hardware store next door, a cashier recounted the tale to a customer, embellishing Sarah's words but capturing the gist of Walter's response. The local news blog, Maplewood Matters, posted a brief article. "Mystery visitor shakes up local bank." It misnamed Walter as William, but got the core right. A powerful figure had exposed a rude employee, and the branch would never be the same. The next morning, the branch opened at 9 a.m., and the air felt different, leaner, like after a rain. Tom arrived early, reviewing staff schedules and drafting a memo about customer service training. He'd already scheduled a meeting with corporate to discuss the incident, knowing they'd want details. But his focus was on the team. He couldn't erase Sarah's actions, but he could ensure they didn't define the branch. Marcus was the first to arrive, greeting Tom with a nod. "Morning, boss. New day, right?" Tom managed a smile. "New day, Marcus. Let's make it count." Javier arrived next, followed by Rachel and the other tellers. Clarence was already there, buffing the floors. The team gathered briefly in the break room, Tom addressing them with a clarity he hadn't shown before. Yesterday was a wake-up call, he said. We're not perfect, but we're better than what happened. Let's prove it starting today. The staff nodded, their faces a mix of determination and lingering unease. Rachel spoke up. I want to do more. Maybe we could start a feedback system for customers, make sure they feel heard. Tom nodded. Good idea. Let's work on it. As the branch opened, customers trickled in, some aware of the previous day's events, others oblivious. Marcus greeted each person with a warmth that felt genuine, not rehearsed. Javier handled a complex transaction with patience, explaining every step to an elderly client. Rachel went out of her way to assist a young couple, offering them coffee while they waited. Even Clarence, usually invisible, got a thank you from a customer who noticed his meticulous work. By noon, the branch was humming, not with chaos, but with purpose. A regular customer, Mr. Thompson, a 67-year-old widower, approached Tom at the counter. Heard about yesterday, he said, his voice gruff. That Hayes fellow's the real deal. You keeping things straight now? Tom met his gaze. We're trying, Mr. Thompson. Every day. Thompson nodded, satisfied. Good. My wife banked here for 40 years. Don't let her down. The exchange was brief, but telling. Maplewood was a small town, and trust was currency. Walter's visit had reminded everyone, staff and customers alike, that trust was fragile, easily broken by a single misstep. That afternoon, a corporate representative called Tom, praising Walter's discretion and the branch's swift response. Hayes didn't push for heads to roll, the rep said. That's rare. Most would have demanded a public spectacle. You're lucky. Tom didn't feel lucky. He felt responsible. We'll do better, he said. Not just for him, but for everyone. The rep promised follow-up training and a review of branch protocols, but Tom was already ahead. He drafted a proposal for sensitivity workshops, focusing on unconscious bias and customer respect. He emailed it to corporate before the call ended, determined to act before being told to. Outside, the town moved on. The diner buzzed with lunch crowds, the hardware store sold out of leaf rakes, and the news blog moved to a story about a local pumpkin festival. But in the bank, the change was tangible. Customers noticed the staff's extra effort, the way they listened more, rushed less. Even the toddler's mother, Lisa, returned to deposit a check and commented to Marcus, "It feels different in here." Better. Marcus grinned. We're trying, ma'am. Thanks for noticing. By week's end, the branch had received 3 handwritten letters from customers, all praising the staff's response to the incident. One was from Lisa, detailing how Walter's calm had inspired her son. Another was from Mr. Thompson, short but firm. Keep it up. The third was anonymous, simply stating, "Thank you for showing us what matters." Tom pinned the letters to the break room bulletin board, a quiet reminder of the stakes. The staff read them in silence, each taking something different from the words. For Marcus, it was motivation to keep growing. For Javier, it was validation of his instincts. For Rachel, it was a call to step up. For Clarence, it was proof that even the unseen could make a difference. Walter, meanwhile, was back in Cincinnati, his visit to Maplewood already fading into the rhythm of his life. He sat in his study, a modest room lined with books and photos of his late wife and grown daughter. The envelope from Tom sat unopened on his desk, next to a stack of financial reports. He didn't need to read it. Apologies were words, and he cared about actions. Evelyn's text from the day before was enough. The branch was changing, and that was what mattered. But Walter wasn't done. He had other branches to visit, other rooms to observe. His role as a shareholder wasn't about power, it was about accountability. He'd spent decades building his wealth quietly, investing in companies like First Trust, not for glory, but for impact. Maplewood was one stop on a long journey, and he carried its lessons with him, just as the branch carried his. The Maplewood branch of First Trust Bank opened its doors at 9 a.m. the following Monday, the air crisp with the promise of a new week. The October light filtered through the glass walls, casting a soft glow across the lobby. The events of Walter Hayes' visit, now nearly a week past, had settled into the branch like a foundation stone, unseen but supporting everything above it. The staff moved with a quiet confidence, their interactions marked by a newfound intentionality. Customers, too, seemed to sense the change, lingering a little longer, smiling a little easier. The branch wasn't perfect, but it was striving, and in a small town like Maplewood, that effort was enough to spark something enduring. Tom Reynolds stood at the front desk, reviewing the day's schedule. His tie was knotted tightly today, his posture straighter than it had been in months. The weight of Sarah Mitchell's dismissal still lingered, but it had been replaced by a clarity of purpose. He'd spent the weekend drafting a comprehensive plan for the branch, mandatory sensitivity training, a customer feedback portal, and regular team check-ins to ensure no one, not even a high performer like Sarah, slipped through the cracks again. He'd sent the plan to corporate on Sunday night, along with a personal note: "This isn't about compliance. It's about who we are." The response, a brief but approving email, had arrived at dawn. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. Marcus, the young teller, arrived early, his usual nervous energy tempered by a quiet resolve. He greeted Tom with a nod and set up his station, double-checking the cash drawer with a precision that felt personal. Walter's words about acknowledging the truth had stuck with him, and he'd spent the past week reflecting on his own hesitations. At 24, Marcus was still finding his place in the world, but the bank felt like a proving ground now, a place where small actions could matter. He glanced at the break room bulletin board, where the customer letters were pinned, and felt a flicker of pride. He'd been part of that day, part of the change. Javier Torres arrived next, his name tag polished and his handshake firm, when he greeted Tom. "Morning," he said, his voice steady. "Ready for a good day?" Tom managed a smile. "Let's make it one." Rachel Bennett followed, her steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. She'd spent the weekend talking to her parents, both in their late 60s, about the incident. Her father, a retired mechanic, had nodded knowingly. "People show you who they are when they think you're nobody," he'd said. Rachel had taken that to heart, vowing to be more proactive, to speak up when something felt wrong. Today, she wore a small pin on her blazer, gift from her mother, a tiny silver dove symbolizing peace. It was a reminder to stay grounded, to listen, to act. Clarence Johnson was already there, as always, his cleaning cart parked near the back hallway. At 64, he moved with a deliberateness that belied his years, his hands steady as he polished the glass doors. Walter's acknowledgement had shifted something in him, a quiet affirmation that his work, his presence mattered. He told his wife about it over dinner, his voice thick with emotion. "He saw me," Clarence had said. "Not the mop, not the uniform. Me." His wife, a Sunday school teacher, had squeezed his hand. "That's what grace looks like," she'd replied. Now, as Clarence worked, he hummed to him, the melody soft but carrying. The branch opened to a steady stream of customers, many of whom had heard about the mystery visitor through Maplewood's grapevine. The diner across the street had become a hub for the story, with regulars debating Walter's motives and Sarah's fate over pancakes and coffee. Some called it a setup, others a reckoning. But most agreed on one thing: the bank felt different now, warmer, more human. Mr. Thompson, the 67-year-old widower, was among the first through the doors, his deposit slip in hand. "Morning, Marcus," he said, his gruff voice softened by familiarity. "Still keeping things straight?" Marcus grinned. "Doing my best, Mr. Thompson. How about you?" Thompson chuckled, a rare sound. "Surviving. Tell that Hayes fella he's got my respect, if you see him." "I will," Marcus said, though he knew Walter wasn't likely to return. The promise felt good, though, like a bridge to the future. Lisa Grayson, the young mother, arrived later with her son, Ethan, who clutched a piggy bank shaped like a dinosaur. "We're adding to his account," Lisa said, smiling at Marcus. "He's been saving all week." Ethan, 7 and earnest, slid a handful of coins across the counter. "I want to be like that man," he said. "The one who didn't yell." Marcus's heart warmed. "You're off to a great start, buddy." He processed the deposit, adding a lollipop from the jar for Ethan. Lisa caught his eye, her expression grateful. At 58, she'd seen enough of the world to know that moments like this, small, human, kind, were what built trust. By midday, the branch was bustling, but the atmosphere was calm, almost reverent. Rachel assisted a young couple with a mortgage application, taking extra time to explain the terms. Javier handled the dispute over an overdraft fee with patience, waiving the charge for a single mother who'd fallen on hard times. Clarence, unnoticed by most, replaced a flickering bulb in the waiting area, his work ensuring the space felt welcoming. Each action, however small, was a thread in the fabric Walter had helped weave. Tom called a brief staff meeting at lunch, gathering everyone in the break room. The microwave hummed, and the scent of reheated lasagna filled the air. "I've heard from corporate," Tom said, his voice steady. "They're impressed with how we handled last week. But more importantly, I'm impressed with you. You've stepped up, Marcus, Javier, Rachel, everyone. Even you, Clarence." Clarence, leaning against the wall, gave a shy nod. Just doing my job, boss. Your job matters, Tom said. We all do. Let's keep it going. Rachel raised her hand. I've been thinking about that feedback portal. Maybe we could add a suggestion box in the lobby, too. Make it easy for customers to speak up. Javier nodded. And maybe a monthly team huddle, not just for numbers, but to talk about how we're treating people. Tom jotted down the ideas. Done. Anything else? Marcus hesitated, then spoke. What if we invited Mr. Hayes back? Not to check on us, but to talk. Like a guest speaker. I think it'd mean a lot. Tom considered it, then nodded. I'll reach out. No promises, but it's worth a shot. The meeting ended, and the staff returned to their posts, energized. The suggestions weren't grand, but they were practical, rooted in the lesson Walter had left behind. Change starts with intention, not fanfare. That afternoon, Evelyn Carter stopped by, her blazer swapped for a cardigan, but her presence no less commanding. She approached Tom at the counter. I heard you're making changes, she said, her eyes sharp but kind. Good. This branch has potential. Don't squander it. We won't, Tom said. Thanks for your call to corporate. It carried weight. Evelyn shrugged. I just told the truth. That's all Hayes did, too. She left, but her words lingered. Tom glanced at the lobby, where Marcus was helping an elderly woman count her change, Rachel was laughing with a client, and Javier was showing a teenager how to use the mobile app. Clarence pushed his cart past, pausing to pick up a stray receipt. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary, a branch reborn through small, deliberate acts. By week's end, the suggestion box was in place, a polished wooden box with a slot and a sign, Your voice matters. Customers began using it, leaving notes of praise, complaints, and ideas. One suggested longer hours on Saturdays, another thanked Marcus by name for his kindness. Tom read each one, sharing them with the team. The feedback portal went live online, and corporate approved the sensitivity training, scheduling it for the following month. The story of Walter's visit continued to spread, though it grew softer with time, less about drama and more about impact. Maplewood Matters published a follow-up, correcting Walter's name and quoting Lisa Grayson. It wasn't just about one person losing their job. It was about everyone learning to do better. The article got a few hundred views, modest, but enough to keep the conversation alive. Walter, back in Cincinnati, received Tom's invitation to speak at the branch. He read it in his study, the envelope from Maplewood still unopened on his desk. He leaned back, considering. Public speaking wasn't his style. He preferred the quiet, the observation, the subtle nudge. But Marcus's earnestness, Clarence's gratitude, the branch's potential, they tugged at him. He typed a reply. I'll consider it. Keep showing me who you are. He hit send, then turned to his next task, another branch on his list. Months later, the Maplewood branch was unrecognizable, not in its walls or counters, but in its spirit. Customers greeted staff by name, staff listened more than they spoke, and the suggestion box overflowed. Corporate noted the branch's improved satisfaction scores, but the real victory was quieter. A community that trusted again, a team that cared again, a town that remembered. One evening, as Clarence locked up, he looked at the lobby, the lights dimmed but warm. He thought of Walter, of the day that had changed everything. Grace, he murmured, echoing his wife's words. He turned off the last switch and stepped into the night, the stars bright above Maplewood. The story of First Trust Bank wasn't about a hero or a villain. It was about people flawed, striving, learning, revealing who they were when the world was watching. Walter Hayes hadn't demanded recognition. He demanded accountability. And in doing so, he'd reminded everyone that power lies not in titles or wealth, but in the choice to treat others with dignity every single day. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Maplewood, where one man's quiet strength reshaped a community. We hope this story made you pause, reflect, and perhaps see the world a little differently. Now, we want to hear from you. In the comments below, share your thoughts. Have you witnessed or experienced injustice like Sarah's behavior? How do you think we should address prejudice and disrespect in everyday life? Do you believe Walter's approach, calm, deliberate, impactful, was the right one? Or would you have handled it differently? Take a stand, share your perspective, and let's start a conversation about dignity, accountability, and the power of small actions. Your voice matters, let it be heard.